Okay, I think we're live. Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS office hours. It is Friday. It is 4 p.m. Swedish time, so we're going to do what we always do. The first thing we always do is me checking that it actually works. So please let me know if you can hear and see me all right. And while we wait for a sign of life, okay, there we go. We are good. Excellent. Hello, everybody. Very nice to see you all here. Hope everybody's having a good week and that you have a cool weekend ahead. Let's see. So we had a question here while I was setting up from Mati, who was asking, Andreas, what do you think about Biscuit programming videos? And I'm just going to say that I love Biscuit programming videos. I'm a huge fan of Biscuit, have been for many years. I think he makes really cool videos, especially these sort of programming tool-assisted speedruns that he makes, where you can see sort of his program evolving in the text editor over time. It's really, really neat. I definitely recommend everybody check out Biscuit if you are not familiar with him already. Let's see. Okay, so what we always do here in office hours is that you bring the questions. They can be technical or non-technical about SerenityOS, programming, or related areas, and then we just talk about them, investigate whatever we end up investigating. We're never quite sure what we're going to look at in office hours, but that's what makes it fun. So let's see. Dead Marshall asks, does the browser have the ability to copy links from all open tabs simultaneously? I guess Google Chrome doesn't have this feature. There's an extension for it, though. Copy links from all open tabs simultaneously. I don't really know what that means. Do you mean copy the URL of every open tab or something like that? That's not something that we have. Or do you mean like copy every possible link in every currently open page? That's also not something we can do, but you know, it's a computer program, so we can make it do whatever we like. So Abhishek says, "Hi Andreas, how have you been doing?" I have been doing pretty well. It's been a nice week. I had a little bit of I sort of stressed myself out about this Handmade Seattle thing. So the Handmade Seattle demo that I made is now up on media.handmadeseattle.com /SerenityOS. So if you want to check out the demo, if you haven't already seen the demo I made for the Handmade Seattle conference, it is now available on their website as like a standalone page with a standalone video. So that turned out really cool. Got a lot of great feedback on it, and last night I posted it to Hacker News, and it was at the top of the front page when I went to sleep. So I had a lot of nice comments and stuff. People were very, very supportive. So that's been really nice. But the flip side of that whole thing is that it was pretty stressful to put together the demo, and it is also stressful to have so many people commenting on your stuff, even if it's all positive or like 99% positive. So I guess I'm a little bit tired, but it's weekend coming up now, so the timing is just right. But thank you for asking. There is your long answer, and I hope that you have been doing okay, by the way. One Infinitive One asks, what happened to the original VVV port? I think what happened to that was I made that port on a different computer, and it was right when I was switching computers. So I was switching from my old computer to this computer that I'm using now, and then I didn't bring the VVVV port with me, and that's how it got lost. So it's Not really lost. It's just sitting on a computer in the corner here that's not on. Let's see. Leia Organa. Wow. Wow. Leia Organa says, fonts. How do you feel about including glyphs from Conscript Unicode registry in the system fonts? Ooh, I don't even know what that is. What is that Conscript Unicode registry? Okay, so in general, I feel like it's cool if the font that we have can display international content. I think it's not super useful to add functionality that nobody will ever see or use, even yourself, right? So just like drawing glyphs for the sake of drawing glyphs, but they're not actually something that you would even yourself see in your daily use of the system. That is, I feel like that's a little bit weird, but it also doesn't hurt anybody to do that. So as long as they don't look like absolute trash, I don't see why not. But I think you can like put the same amount of effort into drawing glyphs that actual people would actually use, and you might feel a little bit better about yourself because what you're doing is more useful. But ultimately, that's not for me to decide what's useful and what's not. So that's just my personal feeling. Since you asked how I feel about it, that's how I feel. But I will absolutely not tell anybody what to spend their time on or judge how you spend your time. And then you also asked, is there any reason behind that Kotitsa 10 has 7 max width? It makes it really hard to create glyphs for some scripts. I'm not sure that there's any particular reason for that. I guess you could expand it, right? The font format allows a glyph width up to 32 pixels because every glyph, every like a scan line of a glyph is a 32-bit value. So you could probably just expand that if you need more space for some glyphs. Since it's a variable width font, it doesn't actually matter. So I don't know why we would have that limitation actually. Let's see. RWXTAR XD says, I took your advice the other day about finding a job in Europe. After I changed my preferences, I got 3 offers this week and I accepted one in Munich. Thanks, Andreas. That's so cool. Congratulations. That is awesome. And I guess that means that you're moving to a new country. That's going to be very exciting. So congratulations to you, RWXTAR XD. Adrian Johnson asks, what's your bench press, squat, and deadlift PR? That's a good question. I think my bench press PR, my bench is definitely my weakest lift. I think my PR is like 110 kilos. My squat PR is, I think, 165. It was a few years ago. And my deadlift PR is 185. So that's what I recall. 110, 165, and 185, I think. But I'm still training regularly, but I'm not really caught up to my old PRs yet, because I have taken a much more casual approach to training in recent years. Dead Marshall says, copy URLs. I still don't really know what that means. Copy which URLs? The 3Creepio. Oh, 3Creepio. That's a cool name. 3Creepio says, love the demo. Well, thank you. I'm really happy with how the demo turned out, because the time constraint was the biggest issue with the demo. The fact that I only had 5 minutes, and as you can see here, I actually ended up using 5 minutes 48 seconds. I did a basic outline of the demo I wanted to do, and then I did a live take of it, and it was something like 15 minutes. So I mean, the first version of it was like 15 minutes, and then I realized just how much work it was going to be to tighten it up to make something that could happen in 5 minutes or thereabouts. That was harder than I expected, and very humbling to to have to do that. And many people have told me that they wish that the demo would have been longer, or that they would have given me more time. And sure, it would have been great to have more time, but then the demo would have probably been very different. So this is what we ended up with. I think it turned out okay. So it is nice to hear that people liked it. Let's see. Simon Branton Housley says, there is some great discussion over at Hacker News about you and this project. That is why I am here. Well, welcome, Simon. Good to have you here. I saw that discussion. I made the original post, and I have been replying to people in that thread. So nice to see that you made your way over here. Welcome to SerenityOS office hours. So RWXTarXD says, question, I've been looking at the terminal source code for Serenity because I'm trying to build my own terminal emulator. I'm hoping you have resources or pointers for me. Is that a question? Question colon. I mean, you're asking for resources or pointers, I guess. So the best resource for terminal emulation, in my opinion, is probably vt100.net. Has lots of great manuals about various popular terminals, including the DEC VT100, which is sort of the base terminal that most other terminal protocols are based on. It's sort of the IBM PC of terminals. And when it comes to, if you're doing this on Unix, then what's his name? Linus Åkesson TTY. Yeah, the TTY Demystified is a great page as well, where Linus Åkesson goes into great detail about how Unix terminals work with sessions and process groups and signals and so on. All extremely useful information for anybody building a terminal emulator. So I will link those for you in the chat so you can check them out. Let's see, Bodgemaster says, does SerenityOS support dual booting? I'm interested in trying to get it to work on bare metal, but I don't want to remove the OS that's currently installed on that computer. So we don't have our own bootloader. You would have to use another bootloader to boot Serenity, and when choosing a bootloader, just pick one that supports dual booting. So Grub, for example, would be a logical choice. You absolutely should not have to install Serenity and remove whatever is currently on your computer. So dual booting is absolutely the way to go. Let's see, Mitchell Bumgardner says, what makes adding font to an OS or even a specific program so complicated / hard? Is it because they have to draw all letters, then render them the same across different resolutions? Thanks. So it really depends on sort of how you scope that work. If you just want to add support for an existing font format like OpenType or TrueType fonts, then you know, it's just a spec that you have to implement, and you don't need that much stuff. You need like the ability to draw vectors and render them into some kind of output surface, but you don't need to draw the fonts if you can just use an existing library of like TTF files. So in Serenity, it's a bit harder. We've made it harder for ourselves because we also make our own fonts. So we have a custom font format for bitmap fonts, and we have a font editor program that we use to edit these fonts, and we just draw everything ourselves. So that's really the bulk of the work on our fonts. Yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff missing here. But we are adding more and more glyphs as we go. And it just takes time because you have to sit here and actually put in the pixels, you know, like click, click, click. And now it doesn't look right anymore. And then once you've drawn the font, though, like actually using it to draw text on screen is not particularly hard. So in our case, at least, actually just drawing all the glyphs by hand is the hard work. But it's not something I would recommend to do if you're just making a random desktop application for Linux or something like that, for Windows or Mac or whatever. Then you can also just use a TrueType library like SDL2TTF or something like that, or whatever the native platform offers. Making your own fonts is it's only for people who enjoy making their own fonts. Let's see. Glamhoth says, have you ever thought about making a video about Serenity project organization? I mean, how the build system is done, Git hooks and actions, etc. This could teach a lot how to set up a new project. So it's not really something I thought about making a video about. And it's also something that is constantly changing. We are very often making modifications to our build process, and it's sort of a continuously growing organic thing almost. I feel like it makes more sense to document that sort of thing as a text document, sort of describing how it's done. But at the same time, making an overview video would probably be useful as well. It's just that it would become out of date eventually, so it would stop being relevant sooner or later because we would keep making changes. So I don't know. Also, I think the way we've set up Serenity is not really how you would bootstrap a new project. Like, we have a fairly sophisticated setup for a fairly unique project. Like, we do a lot of things that you don't want to do in a regular project. Like most projects don't want to build a custom toolchain, for example, or swap in their own toolchain and things like that. Like stuff that only is really relevant if you're doing cross compilation for a custom target. But all that said, it sounds like there could be something valuable there. Let's see. Leia Organa, Princess Leia says, I guess you're right. Even I use the Latin script and write in Klingon. Not, oh my goodness, how do you even say that? Sorry, you know, you would think that I would know how to pronounce Klingon, but I don't. Yeah, so, hey. But at the same time, if you really want to implement or draw glyphs for a Klingon script, then don't let me stop you. So Botchmaster says that he was just considering if there are any special things to consider when dual booting. Not that I know. I'm not super up to date on bare metal running of Serenity. There are other people who are way more interested in that than I am, but we do have the bare metal installation guide in the documentation folder, which in theory is the most up-to-date document on the matter. But if you want to get even more up-to-date info, or like actually have a discussion about this, then we have a bare metal channel on Discord, so definitely inquire in there. That's where all the people who care way more about bare metal than I do hang out. Stark Line says, how many people work behind SerenityOS? Well, that's hard to say. It depends on how you define work, right? If you're looking at how many people are working on SerenityOS full-time as their main source of income and main thing that they do, there's only one person, that's me. If you're looking at the number of people who have contributed code to the project, then GitHub says we have 535 people. And then, you know, you can set some threshold, like the number of people with more than 100 commits and things like that, which we actually have a list of here at the end of the at the end of our README. There's a list of everybody with 100 commits or more in the project. So as you can see, it's a fair number of people who have done a fair amount of work, and it does keep growing, so that's really nice. But yeah, I would just say hundreds. That's what I usually say when people ask. I just say hundreds. And then it's vague, but also accurate. Thomas E13 says, I wonder why you would go for your own font format instead of a raster subset of TTF. Doesn't TTF and OTF support that? I went with the own font format because font stuff was one of the earliest things I did, and I just wanted to get text on screen so I could print out errors. And like at that stage, I didn't want to spend the time on implementing a large font standard. I just wanted to put text on screen, right? So like everything else in the system, it just grew organically. So I just put together the simplest font format I could come up with, and just started blitting text to the screen. And then I made a simple font editor program to be able to draw the fonts instead of having to do it like in a text editor or in a hex editor. I could use a GUI application, and then it just grew from that. That's the reason. Let's see. Zvonimir says, I watched the Handmade Seattle demo video. I like it, but it seems like that video make too much pressure for you. This remind me that good short videos is harder to make, but audience don't think about that. Right. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of pressure to make something that short, and it is it's, I understand why they do that, right? Because the conference organizers want to have this format where they have a lot of small demos to get people excited about seeing random projects. But if you were to spend 10 or 15 minutes on each project, then you would change to, it would be a very differently paced conference format, right? And I'm sure that I could have made a demo that was interesting for 15 minutes, but that's not what they were going for this year. But you know, there's always going to be more opportunities to make longer demos and possibly also shorter demos. Let's see. Mitchell says, oh, whoa, I didn't realize that fonts was that in broad, but also that in depth. Font specs, standards, true type fonts, etc. Right. Yeah. So fonts and typefaces, typesetting is quite broad. It's a very broad area, and we barely scratched the surface of open type support in Serenity. It's definitely something where we can do better. For example, I would love to get better kerning support and subpixel hinting so that we could draw anti-aliased vector fonts and they would actually look nice. But you know, there's a million things that would make the system nicer, and that's just one of them. So I'll eventually get to it if nobody beats me to it. Nick McCarthy says he's just about to build SerenityOS on macOS for the first time. We will see how this goes. Good luck, Nick. Michael Aldrich says, are there any parts of Serenity you feel are your dirty closets? Places you know you need to go back to, but put it off for more fun/important things. Hi, Michael, by the way. Nice to see you here. Places I need... Yeah, so I think the most obvious one is probably the kernel allocator, because it even has a comment at the top, the kernel malloc allocator. It says that it's a really, really really quick and dirty malloc and free implementation. And that I should never let anyone see that shit. And this comment has been here since I added it. And I've just left it in there because I find it funny that I put a comment to make sure that I would replace this with a better allocator before I let anybody see it. And it just makes me laugh because it reminds me of this thing when you're working on something that's not open source, and you always have this idea that I got to clean this up before I show anybody, which this is just a very typical example of. Eventually, though, I need to write a better kernel heap allocator. The kernel malloc is really naive and really inefficient, and it's definitely the most obvious example of my own personal dirty closet in the project. And if somebody else wants to write a better allocator, you are also heartily invited. Anybody is welcome to do that as long as it's better. It's not hard to write a better allocator than the one we have. Let's see. M. Alhelgi and Malhelgi. Oh, that's a very interesting name. M. Alhelgi says, let's say I need a new computer. Of course, I would build a Linux PC. Now, if I want to help out with SerenityOS, are there a few things to consider on the hardware side? Not really, to be honest. Unless you want to do bare metal work, then hardware matters, of course. But if you, like 99% of people or something like that who work on SerenityOS use virtualization to do their work, myself included. And for that, it doesn't matter what kind of host machine you're running on. If you are on Linux, or even on Mac OS or Windows, you can develop using virtualization, and the underlying hardware is just not a concern. That said, if you do want to work on bare metal support for Serenity, I would suggest joining the bare metal channel on Discord and talking to them about how what they would recommend and so on, because I'm not up to date on that. Pankaj says, "Hey Andreas, looks like you missed my question." Looks like I did. Okay. So I will ask again. Could you give a rundown on how to set up DMA currently in SerenityOS? How to set up DMA? I'm not sure what that refers to. Do you mean how do we set up DMA in like in what, like burst transfers to from the hard drive to memory? Or like, we don't have a generic mechanism for DMA. We do have like specialized DMA stuff. What's it called? Like read with read using, no, what the heck is it called? We have DMA buffer support in our ATA hard drive support and hard drive implementation, and also for the sound card also uses DMA, but I don't know exactly what the question is about. I think we use it by default for hard drive transfers. It's so long since I actually looked at that code. Where do we actually set this up? I guess it's probably in BM IDE. This is the bus mastering IDE channel, which should have DMA concerns since it is bus mastering. Yeah, so we allocate a buffer page for DMA and a PRDT page where we store the, I forget what this is short for, but like basically the descriptors for DMA transfers. And yeah, so this is the file I would look in if you want to know how we utilize DMA, how we set that up for hard drive read and write. That's bm IDE channel.cpp. Let's see. Let's see. 590 says, what was the first code you wrote in Serenity? I'm curious how you started building an OS from scratch. So the first piece of code I wrote was actually Actually, it was 3 separate things. And if we go back to the very beginning, the very first commit, this guy right here is the very first commit on October 10, 2018, where I imported I had these 3 separate Git repositories on my computer that were 3 separate things. And I thought, like, okay, I'm just gonna, or actually it was just 2 repositories at this point, I think. The third one came in a subsequent commit. So I started with the early parts of the ACK framework here, as you can see, just like a bunch of convenience classes like a byte buffer, bitmap, hash table, string, vector, just some basic container templates, and an elf loader project, which was at this point, I think it was a program that would load an elf executable on Linux, and then, actually, no, not an elf executable. It would load an elf object file, like a .o file that you would get from GCC, and then sort of link it just in time and then execute it. So that was sort of the beginning of what became the kernel elf loader in Serenity. And then I also had this thing that I called virtual file system, which was really an ext2 file system parser and explorer. So yeah, the very first commit has a standard library, an elf loader and linker, and a ext2 file system thingy. And then a couple of commits later, I also added a widgets library. So that was like 4 hours later, or less than 4 hours later. And that was the beginning of libgui. So if you go to our website, SerenityOS.org, and check out the Happy First Birthday post, there's a little bit of backstory on how that was, and also a screenshot of the ext2 file system explorer thingy. And here is the very first screenshot I ever took of, well, screenshot is literally me photographing the screen with my phone. But this is what eventually became Serenity, libgui, and the very early stage of font rendering that I talked about. This was before we had the custom format. This was actually done using ASCII strings that would have an X for pixel on and a space for pixel off. Humble beginnings. And yeah, this photo was taken on the day that I imported it into the repo. So this is really like what it looked like. This is what I had on the day when I started the project. Steamy says, hi there. Is it possible to work on Wi-Fi stack implementation or Bluetooth? Will you accept such big changes? It's certainly possible, and it would be a great thing to have. Obviously, because we all, or most people, have Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth on their systems. I think it's important to build good abstractions for those kind of things. So every good abstraction starts with a crappy prototype. So I would encourage you to start prototyping and messing around, and then we can talk about how it would fit into the system. But yeah, I mean, I would be happy to see that sort of development. Devi says, do eating in a restaurant vlog. I think maybe this is the wrong channel for that sort of content. But thank you for the suggestion. Undefined says, what do you think is the hardest part of contributing to Serenity? That I don't know, because I've never been on that side of the fence, sort of, because like because I started the project, right? So I'm like the original author, so I don't know what it's like to be coming to the project as a new contributor. But that's something I would love to hear from people. what was the hardest part of starting to work on the project and like starting to contribute changes and stuff. I would be very interested to learn what people feel about that. Toby Duncombe says, first time hearing of this project today. It seems awesome and a great human story, so good job. I'm curious about what your top 3 big priorities are for upcoming development. Well, hello, Toby. Welcome. So I don't really have top 3 big priorities. I don't even have a top 1 big priority. In fact, I don't have a plan at all. This is almost a meme at this point, but there is no plan here. I don't have a plan. Nobody else has a plan. We are just going one day at a time, and everybody works on stuff that they find interesting. And if something is uninteresting, then we just set it aside until somebody feels like they want to work on that. And because of that, development is rather unpredictable, and everybody feels different degree of responsibility for the project moving in whatever direction they want it to move in. But it's something I really like, because I strongly believe that the best software is made by people who are working on what they're genuinely interested in. So I never tell anybody what to do, and I try to tell other people to avoid telling anyone else what to do as well. We really just want people to hack on things that they're interested in, and then it'll take however long it takes to get it to wherever it's going. So yeah, I really don't have any top 3 big priorities. Every day I sit down at the computer and I think, what am I going to improve today? And then I work on that. And so far it has been going really well. And we've got hundreds of other people who take the same approach, and somehow it just kind of fits together. There's a little bit of magic to it that I don't understand, but yeah, like, so far so good. Let's see. Aris says, what do you think about new Intel processors, and how will divide on performance and efficient cores impact on Serenity? Does that complicate development and complexity of the kernel? At this stage, the kernel is not sophisticated enough that these things matter. In the future, at some point in the future, once our kernel is more sophisticated and better able to make use of like processor functionality, it may become a concern, but we are far from that being a problem. And also, as I was saying earlier, we tend to run in a virtualized environment for the most part. So we're really at the mercy of not just the CPU, but like the hypervisor running on the host machine. So I think in the immediate and near future, it has no impact whatsoever. Maybe down the road in a few years, this is something that we'll be concerned about, but I don't know. Jane says, hello, which Linux Arch is best, like distros? I have no idea. I guess whichever one makes you feel the most productive. Ecoptic says, hello, Andreas. Hello, Ecoptic. Welcome to Office Hours. Marius asks, Vim or Emacs? I don't care. I think I personally use Vim. Never really enjoyed using Emacs, but both are fine. It really doesn't matter. Ecoptic says that I just came here and I see you talking about new contributors. I'm wondering, do you have any tips for people that never contributed to projects? How could they start? Aha. So if you've never done that, my recommendation would be to start by finding a bug, either by like screwing around with the software until you discover a bug on your own, or looking through the project bug list and just finding something that you can reproduce, and then try to like debug and work out what's happening and see if you can come up with a fix for it. Because debugging is really one of the best ways to learn a new piece of software. And I often tell people that when you want to do this, you want to learn a new project and get familiar with the code. Don't just read the code, but actually build the code and modify it to add print statements or validations and stuff like that, or tweak the behavior as you go, to start like getting familiar with editing and changing the code, and also validating that your understanding of the code is actually correct. Because there's a really big difference in how well you have to understand the code if you compare like just reading versus reading and actively making changes to the code. And then if you have a bug and then you try to work out what's going wrong, and if you figure out what's going wrong, then you work out how to make a fix. Even if you don't get to the point by yourself that you have a good fix or the best possible fix, just the information that you've gathered by trying to come up with a fix will most likely be useful to somebody who can then guide you, like somebody who's more familiar with the project can then guide you to finding the correct fix. And that's how I would recommend starting. So more specifically about Serenity, what I always tell people is build a system, mess around with it until you find a bug or something that you think could be better, and then try to improve it. But this advice also works in the more generic form for any project, really. And the vast majority of projects will appreciate somebody giving them more information on bugs that they have, right? Nobody's ever going to be upset at you for providing like actionable debugging info about an open bug. At least I would hope not. Let's see. Malhelgi. Damn it, I gotta learn how to say that. Malhelgi. Malhelgi. What does this mean? I don't know how to make sense of this link. Okay, now I'm getting sidetracked. Hold on. Okay, Malhelgi says, do you know people that use SerenityOS? Is there a proper official abbreviation, by the way, as their main operating system? There is no proper official abbreviation. You can call it whatever you like. Usually I call it SerenityOS or just Serenity, but call it whatever people can understand, I guess. And I don't think anybody uses it as their main operating system because it is just not stable enough for that. I may be wrong, of course, but I think I would know if somebody were doing that. So yeah, I don't think anybody's doing that at this point. Ali says, regarding the hardest part of contributing, it was going from, oh, this guy is posting about his OS on G again, to, ooh, that looks like fun to implement for me. Okay, so what Ali is saying, I guess, is that the hardest part was going from sort of spectating to realizing that you could take a more active part in development. And I guess that's probably true for anything, like these open source projects where you see development going on and you see there's all this commotion and like community around something, but to actually take that step to go from being a spectator to being an active participant requires some amount of, I don't know, like you have to apply some kind of energy to yourself to push yourself into that change. And I can relate to that, right? It's like it's hard to go from spectating to participating, but I'm really happy that so many people actually push themselves to do that, because it is awesome to have so many people working on it. Let's see. Leia Organa says, do you have any thoughts what to do about CJK and other complex glyphs that do not fit the current system font? By the way, all questions today should be about fonts. Right. So I don't have any specific idea what to do about Chinese, Japanese, and Korean text. But like obviously our bitmap format is not is just not capable of supporting like complex glyphs and like composite glyphs and stuff like that. Just because it's a simple bitmap format. And my gut instinct is to kind of defer to vector fonts, and ideally we would just draw our own vector font that we could use, but nobody has started out on that work, at least not in any serious fashion. Like we do have the Serenity Sans TrueType font, which is a thing of beauty. Let me show you if you're not familiar. Serenity Sans. This is an original font or original typeface. Hello, friends. And it is a little bit goofy, and it would be awesome to actually put in the work to make some really nice vector fonts for the system that would look similar to the ones we have in bitmap fonts, but actually just be done with vectors. And that's a bunch of work. It's something that I'm interested in doing eventually if nobody else does. And then we could have support for CJK and all kinds of type systems, or not type systems, text systems or whatever, different types of scripts, and all of that stuff through OpenType or TrueType, right? I think it doesn't feel like a good use of time to implement our own composite glyph stuff and complex text rendering and layout using a custom format when we can piggyback on the existing format. So that's my gut feeling about that. I would like us to eventually move towards a OpenType and TrueType based system, and to get to make a TrueType font that renders these things like identically. You would have to do a bunch of, I guess, like these bytecode hinting stuff to get them to look precisely like this at various pixel sizes and stuff. So there's a bunch of work there, but it would be really rad. I don't think we should. I don't feel like the complexity of adding support for these types of scripts to our bitmap font system would be good. It wouldn't be a good complexity benefit thing. But I haven't thought about it until this moment when you just asked, so forgive me for the stuttering reasoning here, but yeah. Toby likes the philosophy of everybody working on the thing they're interested in. Yes, that it's working out really well, I think. Aries says, you need to make this cat dog on the wallpaper say, I don't have plans. Yes, indeed. Maybe he should say, I don't have a plan. There is no plan. There is no plan, and that's something that we really enjoy. Akilendra says, hey Andres, can you explain to me what are kernel hooks in Linux? I'm not sure what those are. And this is a SerenityOS live stream, so I'm not here really to discuss implementation details of Linux. So I would suggest Googling it on Bing, perhaps. Quick Talk says, hi, love the project. I really want to play around with it, but I could not get it to run on my machine. Do you plan to release a VM image or something like that? I don't have a plan for anything in particular. And we don't publish images of the system for a number of reasons. The main one being that the images would be outdated within hours usually, because the system development pace is really rapid, and also because our build instructions are really simple, and if you follow them, you will get it running. And thousands of people have succeeded in making it run. So if they literally do not work for you, we have a build problems channel on Discord, and I recommend asking in there, and somebody can assist you in getting it to work. Let's see. Oh, I have to make sure that I'm looking in the right place. Ari says, text editor wars are stupid. Yes, they really are. See also distro wars. Also very stupid. Alejandro says, hi Andreas, I'm curious what led to the development of the user space emulator. It seems like a spectacular idea, but I do not understand in which case it would be used. So user space emulator really just happened because I'm a big fan of Valgrind, which I use on Linux when I'm working on Linux things all the time. So I was just used to having this, and it's a fantastic tool for finding memory bugs like use after free or memory leaks and things like that. And I couldn't use it in Serenity, and it was frustrating because like I saw some program was using more and more memory, and I had no way to tell what was causing it. And I thought like, what would I really want to do here? Like, what kind of memory debugging tool would I love to have the most? And obviously the answer was Valgrind. So I decided to build a Valgrind for Serenity. So it's what you would use it for is if you have a memory leak, for example, you just run your program in user space emulator. And then when you exit, it gives you a list of everything you leaked. Jason Watson says, do you have a standard metric you run to see how your code changes, specifically kernel changes, have impacted the system? So we don't have many performance tests, if that's what you mean. We do have a lot of correctness tests that run on the CI, and we can also easily run them right here by just typing run tests. This runs our full test suite that we have. And this is also run on every pull request and everything that gets pushed to master. So that's for like finding regressions, although it doesn't find performance regressions, only correctness regressions. And it's a test suite that we're continuously expanding. When it comes to performance tests, the main thing that I've been using, like if I do a random kernel change and I just want to know, is this performance neutral or not? I usually rely on something like test.js, for example, which is just a bunch of JavaScript tests that we run in our JavaScript engine. And it's fine to use it to do like A/B testing for a change, but since the engine itself changes over time and the test suite grows over time as well, it's not reliable as a metric across a large set of unrelated changes. So it's good for A/B testing a specific kernel change, for example. So you can see like, oh, it took 10.9 seconds now, and then if I apply the kernel change, oh, now it takes 8 seconds, when, well, that's probably really good, right? But we don't have any more like specific performance tests. It's definitely something that would be nice to add. And something that somebody will eventually work on when they feel like it, I guess. Let's see. Joseph says, can I play Minesweeper and Solitaire on Serenity? Can you? Yes, of course you can. Minesweeper was one of the very first games added to the system. You got to have Minesweeper, and I put so much time into playing Minesweeper after making it. I was not really familiar with how to play the game before I implemented it, so that was really fun. And you can also play solitaire. We have a card game library sort of that helps you draw cards. So we have solitaire, and we have hearts, and we also have spider. I haven't actually played these for a while, but yeah, we do have them. And it even has that. I'm gonna wait. Can you get that end game animation? I feel like there's some way to. There's supposed to be some way to trick it into showing that end of game animation. Let's figure out what that was. I think it's a secret key combo or something. Solitaire main. What is it called? When do we do the animation? There used to be a way to trigger the animation, but maybe it doesn't allow you to do that anymore. Game over animation. Key down event. Oh, here we are. Shift F12. Aha. There we go. Shift F12. Took me a moment to find that. Yeah, so we do have solitaire and spider, hearts. So you know, you can keep yourself busy with some card fun. And what comes out? What comes after? Malhelgi. Dang it, Malhelgi is Esperanto, which translates closely to darken in English. I'm German, and this translates well to my last name in my language. All right, Malhelgi it is. Armo says, hi, Andreas, and everyone else out there. Hello, Armo. Welcome to Office Hours. Good to see you here. Bodgemaster says, and another question regarding dual booting. Does Serenity know how to handle GPT? The system I want to try this on uses a BIOS plus GPT setup. So I think we have GPT partition support. At least there's code that handles GPT configurations. So it in theory might work. I have not tested it myself recently. I remember when Liav was working on this, but it was more than a year ago, I think. So it may have bit rotted. The best way to find out is to test it out, I guess. And you can actually test it out by making a grub disk image and like booting that in QEMU first before you run it on hardware, just to make sure that the GPT stuff actually works. Daniel Boxer says, hey, just want to say loved your Handmade Seattle demo. Well, thank you, Daniel. I enjoyed your demo as well. Daniel was presenting BoxOS, which is a new operating system he's working on. And I think they didn't post your demo on the website yet. So they're uploading them sort of in the chronological order in which they occurred at the conference. So things are still coming out. And the BoxOS demo should happen a bit later, I think, because there's a bunch of stuff that will come out before that. But looking forward to that. Let's see. S. Salur says, hello, Andreas. How are you today? I am pretty good. How are you? If there is no, Ecoptic says, if there is no plan, why do I always know what you will say when someone asks, what's the plan? Ooh, you got me there. Yeah, that's true. I guess I am starting to develop a at least something that you could call a routine for for when somebody asks about the plan. Yeah. Let's see. Atlas87 says, hello from Brazil. Hello from Sweden. Hope you are having a nice day. Can you explain how the scrolling in a grid widget like the one in System Monitor works? How it draws the items while scrolling? Absolutely. Let's look at that. So you are talking about our libGUI's table view widget in this case. So let's bring up System Monitor and take a look here. So if you scroll this thing up and down, we are obviously scrolling the content of the table. And the way this works is that the table view widget is actually a composite widget, if you will, that has it has the table view itself, which is responsible for laying out and rendering like all these table rows with data in them. And then we have a header view, which is this thing up top here that has all of the column names, and they're also like clickable to change the sort order, stuff like that. And you can also right-click it if you want to change sort of which things are visible. You can go ahead and add and remove different fields. And that's called a GUI header view. And then on the right-hand side, we have a GUI scroll bar. And you could also have a scroll bar below if there is more content space horizontally than we can fit, then we also display a horizontal scroll bar. So the scroll bars dynamically appear or disappear depending on the content size. And let me just verify that I have this right. I think the GUI table view inherits from a class called abstract table view, which inherits from, wait, that didn't take me to the right place at all. Abstract table view inherits from abstract view, and abstract view inherits from scrollable widget, abstract scrollable widget. And abstract scrollable widget is a base class in our libGUI library that all of our widgets that have scrollable content inherit from abstract scrollable widget. So there's a bunch of them. So there's a text editor, and then there's abstract view, and then abstract view is inherited by a whole bunch of different things. And the basic outline of how this works is that, wait, it feels like it froze. Oh, it didn't. Okay. We have there's a content rectangle that moves around inside of the view. That's sort of the basic idea. And you use the scroll bars to shift the viewport. Wait, hold on. Let me phrase this differently. A better way to explain it is the view is a viewport, and there's a content rectangle inside, which can be larger or smaller than the viewport. And the viewport is like a window onto the content rectangle. And the table view in this case, let's see, maybe it's an abstract table view actually. Set content size. Yeah, so the table view figures out like how much space do these rows of data actually take up by like computing the size of them, and then it informs the abstract view base class that, or the abstract scrollable widget base class, that the content has a certain size, and that then leads to the creation or removal of scroll bars. And what we're doing here is we're just manipulating the viewport rectangle. So maybe I should show this in GIMP or something. Whatever. So let's imagine that we have, should have had my tablet set up for this. So we have a, this is like our table view that has some interesting data and a bunch of rows like this. And then the widget, so the abstract scrollable widget sort of provides a, actually, let me draw that in a different color, provides a view onto the stuff in the content. So you move around this viewport rectangle by manipulating the scroll bars. And the viewport rectangle is the size of the widget. I feel like I could explain this much better. I don't know why I'm struggling with this. But yes, that's sort of how it works. And then the actual painting of the viewport happens by just, we just paint the content with an offset. So when we actually render a table view, then we simply translate the painter that we use by the horizontal and vertical scroll bar values. So essentially we paint the entire table view content, but we translate the painter so that you only end up seeing the stuff that is visible with your specific viewport rectangle. And I think we also have an optimization here, which actually detects that. So by default, if you do that, like, you're going to end up painting a bunch of things that don't end up visible on screen. So there'll be a lot of overdraw, especially if you have a huge table with a lot of stuff in it and you only have a tiny viewport, right? Like, you don't want to draw all of the things you can't see. So we do have optimizations for sort of culling things that are outside the visible viewport. And we do those, I think it's right here, first visible row and last visible row. So we compute, like, what's the first visible row that you can see on screen and what's the last one, and then we simply ignore everything outside of that range. But yes, that's sort of how it works. Mitchell says, I use a Mac for work and I liked how you were able to freely move and resize apps with the mouse in your Linux OS. So I found a program that lets me do that now and I could never go back. Right. Yeah, that's such a game changer when you gain the ability to manipulate windows without having to grab at like a tiny part of the edge of the window, right? It's just so nice to be able to grab anywhere in the window and manipulate it, or like have a much bigger area that you can grab. I'm a very big fan of that. Let's see. Estler says, I've looked at Minuet OS. It's a size that fits on a 1.44 floppy disk. He reported that he did this with assembly. Can this be achieved in C++? It's very possibly, but that seems like that's like completely uninteresting goal to me, so I have no desire to try to make the system fit in a tiny space. Let's see. Abhijit says, hi Andreas, thanks for having these streams. Have you thought about localizing the operating system into different languages down the line? I've thought about that and I don't want to do it. This system is in English and everybody who works on it can speak English, and like, we're not trying to appeal to non-technical users or people who are not developers, so making it more palatable to those types of users is irrelevant. Let's see. Venjal says, is this Serenity run on servers or data centers and could run web servers and SQL databases? I'm not aware of any server currently running Serenity, but I don't think it's stable enough to do anything serious, but you could certainly host a web server on it if you tried. That would be that would be interesting. But I think you will find that we do need to improve our stability before you could do anything serious with it. Three Crupio says, "Oh man, Swedish Minesweeper." Indeed, indeed. The Minesweeper is Swedish. It's a neat little Easter egg, if you will. Joseph says he loved the Diablo episode. Keep up the good work. Yeah, that was a fun episode, the Diablo one. It's been a while since we did games. Malheligi says, which file system does Serenity support? Serenity supports, out of the box, the ext2 file system, which is compatible with like Linux and BSDs and other systems. And we also have the ISO 9660 file systems for CD-ROMs, and we have the Plan 9 file system for networked file system access. And then we have a bunch of different sort of kernel internal file systems like tempfs, procfs, devfs, stuff like that. S-Seller says, are you planning to make an insider version like Microsoft is doing soon? I am not planning anything. Alex K says the viewport demonstration would have been clearly better in Pixel Paint. You are so right about that. That would have been so much better in Pixel Paint. Why didn't I use Pixel Paint? Damn it, let's correct that right away. It's so much better to do that in Pixel Paint. Let's bring up the big PP program here and just we can just draw something. Actually, what do we do? Yeah, we can do this. And then we just put like some text here, like these are my table rows. Beautiful. That looked a little bit weird, but okay, sure. And then we want to have a viewport, so we'll use the rectangle tool again. Why don't we make it a new layer even? Click. And we can even move it around. In this case, it would be nice to not have to see the layer outline when I do that. But yeah, this is so much nicer than what I was doing in GIMP. We need to invent a way to hide the layer outline, optionally, of course. That would be a good feature. Anyway. Not Legit says, does anyone know of a program that does the window manipulation stuff on Windows? I don't know that personally. Maybe somebody else does. That would be very nice if somebody could inform us. Atlas87 says, thanks for the explanation. It's kind of hard to find information on how GUI elements behave under the hood. Right. Yeah, it's not the most documented thing in the world. That's why I think if you are interested in these type of things, I recommend trying to make your own little GUI elements sometimes, because it can be really educational to mess around with that and like sort of figure out from first principles how you could do these things. And in doing so, you can like look at other implementations, see how they achieve it, and so on. And I come from a background of working on Qt and KDE, so I have seen a lot of GUI widget internals and stuff while working on those. But I think it's something that many people don't know that much about. They just kind of take them for granted. And I'm a big fan of not taking things for granted. Like, if you use some abstraction and you're curious about how it works, then look into it and try to re-implement it if you're really interested. And Malhiligi says that was one relaxing Bob Ross Pixel Paint moment. Thank you for that. Yeah, Pixel Paint is really shaping up to be pretty sweet. That is nice. I wonder this layer outline thing. How do we draw that thing anyway? Image. It's been a little bit of a while since I worked on Pixel Paint, so Let's see how we draw that. Image, paint into. Okay, so when we paint an image into a painter, then we iterate through all of its layers. And we draw a scale bitmap. Sure. Okay, so probably image does not render that outline. Image editor, maybe? Probably image editor. Yeah, here we are. So if we have an active layer, then we draw the enclosing integer rect of the active layer when we are doing that. So we could make that a setting, right? So like if m show active layer boundary. Also, that looked a bit goofy. Let's merge those conditions. Okay. True by default, sure. And then we need to make an action that toggles this behavior. So show pixel grid is here, so bool. Okay. Sure. Actually, let's put that out of line so that we can also do an update call. Make sure we re-render if needed. All right. Okay, so if m show active layer boundary is already show, then ignore it. Otherwise, set it. And let's repaint ourselves so that things look nice. That should be pretty cool. And then we just need to hook this up in the Pixel Paint main with some kind of UI. So do we have checkable actions already? Wait, no? Oh, dang it. Where do we do these? Okay, I forget how this app is built up. So we have these show pixel grid. Okay, let's just put it next to pixel grid. This is in the main widget class of Pixel Paint. Okay, okay. So view, we'll put it right below there. So show active layer boundary action is a GUI action. Create a checkable. All right, and what will this action be called? Show layer boundary active. Maybe like that. Do we want to have a shortcut for that? I think probably not. We don't need a shortcut for that. It's such an unusual thing. And then we just need to do something smart here. So like, if auto editor is the current image editor, then editor set show active layer boundary is the action is checked. Okay. That sounds reasonable. And then we just need to add it to the view menu. So click. Okay. Let's try it out. Yeah, I gotta do a little bit of gotta do a little bit of programming sometimes when you notice a missing feature like that. Can't stand for something such horrible. So let's draw. Now we have two layers, and if I move this around, we can see the boundary of the layer, but the default value is wrong. Yeah, so that toggles it nicely. Very good. Yeah, so just the initial state needs to be correct. And I guess we can read it out from a config so that it persists across across program invocations. So we'll call it not rulers show, but layers show. Well, no, we'll put this into the image editor. Show active layer boundary, let's say. Default true. Yeah, that should be pretty good. Nice little feature. Yes. I think this is the most code I ever wrote on office hours. So thank you for bearing with me as I add a feature that we simply must have. Yeah, now it's pre-checked. That's good. Then we can uncheck it maybe. Wait, why doesn't it open? Oh, there we go. That's good. Now it's unchecked. We exit the program. See that it's still unchecked. No, it's not. Ooh. Did that not get saved? It did not get saved. Wait a minute. Interesting. Okay, well, I'm just going to add that to the config file. Pixel paint. Image editor. Yeah. Okay, so there we have a nice little feature. Pixel paint. I gotta clean this commit up later, but add option to toggle, allow toggling the active layer boundary display rect. Yeah, I have to write more of a commit message for that later, but nice to have. Okay, let's get back to questions. Let's see. Alex says, hey Andreas, I was curious, does Serenity have a way to do I/O in a non-blocking manner? If so, can you explain a bit how that works? So we have just standard POSIX I/O facilities at the moment. So you would use the select syscall, right? And select Unix. And you can set up select on a file descriptor, and then you just wait for available data or available readable data or the available write access. We don't have any fancier async I/O facilities, so I don't know exactly what you mean other than that. But yes, you can definitely avoid blocking and then use select to figure out if something is readable or writable. Malheligi says, do you have any book recommendations for learning those OS first principles or history? If books aren't your type or thing, maybe you can share with us where to find or gain some knowledge. Thanks. So indeed, books are not really my thing. I haven't read many books. I'm always recommending the osdev.org wiki to people who want to learn about operating system stuff. It's a wiki, so of course, it has uneven quality like any wiki, but it's full of really good, really useful information. So definitely recommend browsing around here if you want to learn about random OS, basic OS concepts. Let's see. Diego says that there is a program called AltDrag. Yeah, so I think that might be a thing on Windows. That would be sweet. Daniel says, thank you. Yes, I think my demo should be uploaded by the end of the week. Yes, so we'll be looking out for the Box OS demo on the Handmade Seattle website. Drist Do Erden says, hey, nice to see you, and thanks for the mmap video. It was great to understand underlying system. Right. Yes, I think that turned out pretty good. It was nice to do a little bit of hacking on kernel memory management stuff. I'd like to do more of that. It's been so long since I hacked on memory management, so I think I have a couple of things that I want to get back into with that, and I will definitely turn them into videos because I think a lot of them will be very interesting. At least I hope they will be interesting. Let's see. SLR says, can you show me how the system settings customizations are set and how you design them? I don't know what that means exactly. Radiant Mango says, I missed saving the setting in the event. Yeah, that's probably what I did. Yeah. Let's see. We have to actually write out the setting. Of course, you're totally right. I didn't do that. Show active layer boundary. Action is checked. Yeah, that it is. I have to say, wait, who was saying that? Alex K was saying, yes, more live coding in the future, please, if it's not too stressful. This is a great example of me screwing up because I was indeed feeling stressed. Like I just wanted to finish it up, and I didn't even think about writing out the actual setting change. And live coding is very different from pre-recorded coding, but it's probably something I would enjoy getting better at, so we can do more of that. But I would still like to come at it with sort of some idea of what I'm going to work on. But sure, it's something we could experiment with. Daniel Boxer says, OS Dev bare bones tutorials are great. Yeah, they are pretty good. Definitely worthwhile starting there if you don't know how to get started on an operating system and you want somebody to hold your hand a little bit and get you started, get you going, then those tutorials on OS Dev Wiki are fantastic. Tons of people have started there, so you can't go wrong with osdev.org. Drizdo Erden says, VM stuff is always interesting. We'll be glad to see new videos about memory management and virtual memory of the operating system. Yeah, I think it's also interesting. And I remember in the past, I used to feel like I didn't want to make videos about those kind of topics because they were sort of much more abstract than making more like graphical videos or working on things that had a visible component. But something I learned from having this YouTube channel is that people are interested in a lot of different topics, and you don't have to make GUI changes for something to be interesting, which it sounds silly now, but like I used to actually worry about that like if I would make too many kernel videos or something, then people would just lose interest, or that it wouldn't be good YouTube content. The 3Creepio says, preparing what to do on the live stream sounds like making plans. Oh no. Yeah, that's true. So I would have to limit myself to preparing only for 5 minutes before starting the stream. No more than that. Which is usually about the same amount of preparation I do for my regular videos. Just coming up with a topic and then starting. Radiant Mango says, for you, is build system an interesting part of a project, or is it just something that should work? I'm not terribly interested in build systems, to be honest. It is ideally something that would just work, but in practice, obviously, it's not like that. For any non-trivial project, you have to interface with the build system. And it's just a reality. Like you have to tell your build system how to build your software, like what it needs. Ideally, from my perspective, it would understand what I want and then just do what I want with as little input from me as possible. But it feels like build systems are doomed to inevitable complexity because everybody wants to do something different with the build system, so they end up expanding and making themselves more flexible for to be able to support more use cases, and you just get this huge grid of possible combinations of options, and you just have to accept that that is your life when you're making a build system. Unless you were to make a highly opinionated build system, for example, in a greenfield language, where you can say like, okay, well, this is going to work this way, and screw you if you want to do something differently, then obviously you can make a more restricted feature set. And also, like, what we do in Serenity is very restricted in a way because we have no runtime dependencies. So we build our own libraries, which makes it a lot easier for us to do a lot of things. But that's obviously not a luxury that any random project would have. Like most software projects have dependencies. Vengel says, do you recommend GTK libs for any new GUI programmer? I would not recommend GTK for a new GUI programmer unless you specifically want to target a GTK desktop. In which case you should definitely use GTK. If you want to make an application that is specifically for Linux, for example, and you want it to run on typical distros of today, then using GTK probably makes sense. I would look for some kind of wrapper library around GTK, like a C++ wrapper or something like that, because dealing with the raw C API is very verbose, and I think you don't have to do that to yourself. If you have the money, I would recommend using something like Qt if you're willing to spend the money. And certainly if you're making open source and you don't have to pay for it. Although now that I say that, I actually have not kept up to date on Qt licensing, so maybe what I'm saying is not even true anymore. I remember they started making some weird changes to their licensing, so let me just walk that back and say I'm not exactly sure what I would recommend at this point, but I would not recommend using the raw C API for GTK. I would recommend maybe using GTK with a wrapper if you specifically care about targeting the Linux desktop. Conquer from Opaco says, what recommendations do you have for the organization of large software projects in the beginning? Well, I would imagine that every large software project is small in the beginning, so I would recommend starting small and building incrementally and organically. And I think premature abstraction is almost always a terrible thing, and a black hole that absorbs your time and productivity. So like, take advantage of the fact that your project is small in the beginning, and like, don't put a bunch of effort into building out a huge build system abstraction just because you expect the project to become large. Like, enjoy that nimbleness that you have, and just iterate. That's what I would recommend. Venkatesh says, just watched your demo on Handmade Seattle. It was short and awesome. Thank you. I think it turned out pretty good, actually. I'm happy with it. And there were, like, a bunch of other things, of course, that I would have loved to show, but the things that I ended up showing, they felt like each of these things were like individually cool, and they also sort of painted a picture of the system as a cohesive thing that you could maybe become interested in and check out for yourself, and then people will discover that other stuff. Hopefully, we'll see. Marek says, "Hi, do you have separate virtual address for each driver? What pros/cons would it have?" I don't know what that means. If we have a separate virtual address for each driver, do you mean a separate virtual address space for each driver in the sense that each driver would run in its own process? That we do not have. We have a monolithic kernel, so all of our device drivers run in the same kernel address space. Radiant Mango says, follow up to that, is there anything of the build system that should get the Serenity treatment to have fewer dependencies? I don't know. I think like it's always tempting to get rid of dependencies by implementing things by yourself. But if you are like writing production code at your job, it's usually advisable to make use of existing libraries instead of implementing your own thing. There's a time and a place to implement your own thing, of course, and it's when you need something custom that the existing libraries on offer don't actually support. But in most cases, like implementing your own stuff is probably going to cost you more time than using something existing. So I don't know that that's like generally advisable. Dilem says Meson is quite good at the moment, to be honest. Certainly much less of a hassle to work with than CMake weird syntax. I don't have a problem with CMake syntax. Ecoptic says, what do you think about making programs with minimal functionality in the binary to make the source code minimal and well made, and adding the rest of the functionality in another way? Is that a good approach? For example, a text editor with just a basic functionality, but implements keybinds and shortcuts in a scripting language, or make a very basic language, but make most of its functionality in itself. I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other. I guess it's tempting to build a simple extensible thing, and then implement functionality in sort of as extensions. But I think that makes sense if you're building something that has like unknown use cases, right? So if you're building something that people are going to use and you're not sure what they're going to use it for, and the users are likely to have wildly different needs, then it definitely makes sense to have a pluggable architecture so that they can insert their own functionality. But I don't necessarily think this is a great way to build every program. If you're just building like Minesweeper, for example, that doesn't need to be scriptable necessarily. You can also just implement Minesweeper in whatever native language you're using. But there are a couple of programs that people tend to want to script. I guess like productivity programs like your text editor. A lot of people enjoy customizing their text editor or their IDE, but also other productivity software like Office suites and audio workstations, that sort of stuff, tend to be pluggable in some to some extent. And I guess you could probably enforce a good plugin architecture if you put yourself in the situation where you're forced to implement the entire program via the plugin mechanism. It will probably be more cumbersome, but you'll be sure that the plugin mechanism works, right? And I remember there was there was somebody demonstrating something at Handmade Seattle, actually. I think it was a game engine that was completely plugin based. So like everything was written as a plugin. And yeah, you can definitely do that, but just do whatever is more convenient, I guess. Whatever makes the most sense on a program to program basis. Nicholas says, hey Andreas, what's new for ARM? I want to install Serenity on my Raspberry. When it's done, will you do a tutorial or something? I don't know what's new with ARM. I'm not really participating in that effort. I haven't seen any particular new things recently. So, but when that happens, somebody will, when there's something that you could actually install, I'm sure that somebody will write a document about it or make a little tutorial video or something, how to get it set up. And I'll be sure to share it so that people find out when that happens, in whatever format it happens. Marek says, yes, virtual address space per driver. Right, we don't have that. SLR wants a link to the demo. Let me hook you up. Here's a link to the demo once again. And then Mati was asking, what about hosting the SerenityOS website from SerenityOS? That is definitely something that would be cool. It is, we do have a web server in Serenity, but it's not something that I have tested extensively, and it's definitely not stable enough to host the SerenityOS.org website yet. But I think ultimately that's definitely what we want to do. And the main concern is really just the stability, fixing issues with, like, if lots of requests are coming in, make sure that the kernel doesn't just fall apart, things like that. Because, you know, I don't want the web server dying. I guess it could be set up in a way that that has like a watchdog process or something that periodically checks that the web server is still working, and if it doesn't work, we just reboot the server. But yeah, that would be a really fun thing to have, actually. So maybe that's something we should look into. I don't know. Let's see. Mati also asks, can you set a HTML live wallpaper on Serenity? No, that's not a function that we have. All our wallpapers are static. Is there a spreadsheet program in SerenityOS? From Maximilian. Yes, there is. There is a spreadsheet. Let me... Oh, I have so many things open. Let me show you. Dun, dun, dun. It's in Utilities Spreadsheet. Check it out. And it even has built-in help where you can learn about the various functions that are supported. So we do have a spreadsheet, although important to know is that it doesn't use the typical like Excel style language, but instead you use JavaScript to write functions. Let's see, Nicholas says, thanks for the answer about ARM. Have you seen something about Asahi Linux? Hector Martin is porting Linux to Apple Silicon. What do you see about it? Share your thoughts about this, if any. Yes, I have seen Asahi Linux. It looks like a nice project. And it also seems like this inevitable thing. Like whenever new hardware comes out, somebody will always port Linux to it, followed by NetBSD and other systems like that, right? And I don't really have any strong opinions about that. I don't understand why you would want to run Linux on a Mac when you can run macOS on a Mac. But I know that not everybody feels that way. I think if you want to run Linux, you can get a much cheaper computer. To me, the value of a Mac is to run Mac OS and get all the benefits of Mac OS. Anyway, Mati says, do you plan to emulate Linux ABI? I do not plan anything. Not a thing in the world. RWXTar says, I really want to run Linux on my M1 Mac. Yeah, I mean, I see that people want to do that. I just not really sure what the benefit is. Like, what is... Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fun in something like that, making it work. But it takes me back to when I was younger and collecting Unix machines. Like, I would collect these Spark stations and stuff like that. And I remember installing Linux on them and BSDs on them. And it always ended up feeling so hollow. And then I would go back to SunOS or Solaris, and it was fun again. Because you've seen Linux a million times. And like, there's nothing new about it. Whereas I always enjoyed like exploring and diving into these things that were different than Linux. But yeah, not everybody's like that. And obviously, if you enjoy something, then you should just do it. I think I'm just struggling to understand. Let's see. Jacob asks, hi, how does system know if you call fopen what to invoke precisely? Is there any link between C library and syscalls? Sure. So the C library knows which syscalls to do. So fopen, for example, will turn around and call the open syscall. So internally, fopen calls open, and that's kind of how that works. And then, of course, open is a wrapper around the kernel syscall. So we actually call into the kernel here after we set up the parameters to pass to the kernel. But basically, the C library is the closest thing to a stable API that we have. We don't have a stable syscall ABI. If you want to write software for Serenity, the thing you want to target is the standard C library. Let's see. Jason Blank runs Linux on Mac for security reasons. Yeah, I mean, I don't know which system is more secure, actually. It's an interesting thing to explore. Because I imagine that Linux does not take advantage of all of these security facilities in the Apple hardware. Let's see. Daniel San says, can I come in? Yes, you can come in. Welcome. There is always there's always room for more, so welcome. And Jason says that he can barely get the audio working correctly. I doubt any exploits target Linux on Mac. See, that's funny. I mean, maybe you're right, but that's a little bit funny to me, because that's always been this argument that people have that some system is more secure, because like hardly anything works, or hardly anybody uses it. And remember, for many years, like Apple was boasting that it was so much more secure than Windows. And I guess a large part of why that was true was because it was a smaller market share. So we'll see how long this lasts. Like if it starts working correctly and people start using it, then you'll get your exploits too. Mati says, does SerenityOS use VDSO to perform syscalls? We do not use VDSO to perform syscalls. We use something similar to a VDSO for quick, fast time access. So if you query the system time using the monotonic or real-time clock sources in coarse mode, I think, which is the default that we use, then we don't perform a kernel syscall, which is very beneficial because it means that like reading the current time is just a memory access rather than a context switch. Kenneth Rodas says, any plans to support Node.js in Serenity? I don't have a plan for anything in particular. If you want to support Node.js on Serenity, I suggest investigating what that would take and then implementing whatever is missing. See how it goes. Alex K says, rather specific question. What is the shortcut you use to resize QEMU when you move the window around during boot? You mean like, what do I use? Wait, what does that mean? Oops. When I move the QEMU window around like this or like that, I'm just like Alt left mouse button on my Ubuntu Mate, which I'm using. Alt left mouse button is move window, and Alt right mouse button is resize window. So that's basically it. Of course, it might be different on your window manager. It depends on what you're using. That's how I have it set up here. Let's see. Drist says, also lots of things M1 gave Linux still not support, like compressed memory pages, etc. Yeah, but like the Linux port for M1 will keep improving, of course. Like a lot of people are going to want to use it. So I think it's probably going to become really quite good, because especially if Apple stops making Intel laptops, then obviously if M1 becomes the only type, or like the Apple Silicon becomes the only type of MacBook, people are going to keep buying MacBooks because they are nice hardware and people like them. So Linux support will keep improving. Radiant Mango says, would no exec on most mounts per default be feasible? I think so, absolutely. You don't, I mean, it depends on how many mounts you have, but if you have all of your executables in one place, then you can mount everything else with no exec. And maybe you would have a specific partition mount where you keep executables. So like if you do software development and you generate executables, you could do that there. But it's probably something you could do. Alex K says, I mean the bug where the QEMU window does not show the whole desktop because of moving the window during the boot. So there's a keyboard shortcut for that. It's Control-Alt-U, I think. So if you mess it up somehow, let's see if I can mess it up. I never really tried to mess it up on purpose. Seen it didn't work. But what you can do is you can press Control-Alt-U and it will sort of revert back to the correct size. So if I screw up the size like this, maybe a little bit more, and then I just press Control-Alt-U and plop, goes back to it. So that's what I would recommend. I will type it here actually, just to make it really clear. Control-Alt-U. Let's see. SPQ says, oh wait, Danielson says, you tweeted it's a good idea to once in a while implement a new data structure to really get it. What was the last data structure that you learned? I think the last one I implemented was an AVL tree. It was a few months ago now. Let's see. SPQ says, can you explain in more detail how this VDSO alternative works in Serenity? E.g., is there a page where the kernel updates some read-only data or similar? Yes, that's exactly what it is. Kernel time page is what we call it. So The kernel has a single page of memory where it stores this structure. So it has these two synchronization counters, and then it has an array of timestamps, basically. And when the system clock updates in the kernel, it just writes it out to this time page. And then from user space, this is in the C library. So user space has a syscall that it can make called map time page, which then maps the kernel time page somewhere in the process's own address space. And then from that point on, we can just read the time page to get the current time. And of course, the time page is read-only. So that's exactly how it works, the kernel time page. Mati says, is your CPU emulator used in memleak debugger able to run whole SerenityOS on SerenityOS? No, it cannot. The user space emulator does not implement any system instructions, so it cannot run operating systems. It can only run user space programs. It has no concept of like task switching or things like that, or interrupts. It only does user space code. So ring 3 code, basically, in x86 terms. Poison says, how do you live full-time and make money with Serenity to live? I make money from donations. So people support me on GitHub sponsors, Patreon, and places like that. And that is what I do. Asaf Cohen says, could you show us where the software interrupt-based timer is initialized? I'm guessing you're not using a NOP-based one. The software interrupt-based timer. Wait, what's a software interrupt-based timer? Software interrupt. I don't know what that is. Software interrupt-based timer. We use hardware interrupt timers in Serenity, and all of the timer setup happens in time management. So if you go and investigate kernel time management, then you can find all of the different time sources that we use. So we support like the classic IBM PCPIT timer, and we also support HPET for high precision timers. And we use different timers for different things. So there's a bit of complexity here, but I'd recommend, if you want to learn more about how our timers work, you can go there. Let's see. Oh, Dean with the super chat. Thank you, Dean, for demonstrating how I make a living. I really appreciate that. This is indeed how I pay for groceries and keep the light on. And it's been really interesting so far to switch to a completely crowd-funded lifestyle. Definitely have a little bit less money than I would with a regular job, but I also have much greater freedom to work on interesting things like SerenityOS. So I'm really happy about it. And I'm really, really grateful to everybody who has been supporting me. It's just amazing how much love I get and how much love this project gets. And I can't thank you all enough for continuing to support it and take an interest in it. So I think that's a great note to end on for today, actually. I'm really happy that you all came here. Thank you so much for all the questions and all of the nice conversation. I hope everybody's going to have a great weekend. And if you end up working on Serenity this weekend, then do come by the Serenity Discord and tell us what you're working on. Let's show each other what we're doing. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and see you next time. Have a great weekend.